there is always something you cannot see controlling what you can. And if I spend all of my time and all of my energy popping at all of the symptoms of the problem, just dealing with those things that are occurring and erecting in our marriage and in our finances and our struggle, and we spend our time and our money and our resources and our human rationale to figure out the problem, we will at best exhaust ourselves when we haven't even begun to tap into the root of where the real problem is stemming. The Apostle Paul says in Ephesians chapter 6, he says, come on, y'all, pull back the curtain and let the enemy know we got our eyes on you. That it's not your spouse who is the problem. There's an enemy. It's not your boss who is the problem. There is an enemy. It's not even your own personal internal turmoil that is the main problem. There is an enemy who lives to stir dissension and division and to seed jealousy and envy, to cause you and I not to have any peace of mind and peace of heart. And the enemy Paul wants you to know how strategic the enemy is, y'all, because he says, listen, the enemy is scheming against you. Somebody say scheme. Listen, if I find out that somebody has done me wrong, I mean, I'm upset, but I can get over that. But if I find out somebody has been planning to do me wrong, now that's a whole nother story. I find out you've been scheming against me, meaning you've been sitting back studying my tendencies and my patterns. You've been watching for where I come and what I go, and you've been trying to take advantage of what the weaknesses of my flesh are. You've been looking into my personality to figure out what would be the best way to throw me off course. When I find out that not only have you been studying me, but you've been studying my husband, trying to look into his history so that you can figure out, given my history and his history, the best way to make explosions of anger happen in our family. When I find out you've been trying to explore his weaknesses so that you can tempt him away from his heart and his emotions being at home with me. When I find out that not only have you been studying me and my man, but you've been also looking into my 3 boys, these little men that the Lord has given me to raise in the fear of God, and you've been trying to figure out the best way to thwart them from reaching the destiny that God has assigned to them. You're trying to figure out the best way to take advantage of their fears and their weaknesses and their deficiencies. When I find out you've been studying me and the people that I love, you better believe that now a holy indignation rises up on the inside of me. I'm not just going to stand back and let you run roughshod over my family. I'm not just going to stand back and let my city decline continuously and just act like you are not there playing us for the fool. I will be the one, and I pray the Church of Jesus Christ will be the one that will stand as gatekeepers in our community and say, not today, not on our watch. And so if it's a war the enemy wants, it's a war he will have. Not by our strength and not in our power, but by the power of God's own Spirit. The victory is already won. And we have the privilege to claim that victory and experience it as a regular part of our lives. So would you know, everything that has happened this week, y'all, all the devastation and all the tears that have been cried, all the lives that have been lost, underneath it all, it's not about officers and it's not about racial division. There is an enemy trying to stir up trouble. And if we turn our attention on each other, instead of pulling back the curtain and say, we got our eyes on you, and we're coming after you with weapons that work. The Apostle Paul says, put down all of the weapons that are futile. They're just popping at symptoms, and they may take care of them in your marriage or in your city or in your home. They may take care of them for a while, but you better believe when one goes away, there's another one coming right back up. Paul says, I'm going to give you some weapons that work. And he gives us, traditionally people say 6, but really I believe there are 7 pieces of armor. I want to tell you briefly what they are. He says you need to make sure that you stand firm in verse 14. Gird your loins with truth. He says then you need a breastplate called righteousness. But he doesn't stop there. He says you need something for your feet. They better be shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Then he says you need a shield, and it's called faith. He says in verse 17, you need a helmet. You need something to guard your mind. You need a helmet called salvation. And you need a sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. And while most people stop there, the Apostle Paul does not. He says, even though these 6 things are important, you need one more thing. In verse 18, he says, and pray. Prayer is the divinely ordained mechanism, y'all, that our God has given us. It's like a key that unlocks the heavens and allows all the blessings that our God already has for us to actually be dispensed to us. Prayer doesn't manipulate God. It accesses what God has already aligned to us in our lives here on earth. And so pray. If you want victory in your marriage, would you make sure you are a man or a woman of prayer? If you want victory, teenager, in your high school or student at your university, then you got to become a person of prayer. And if you say you want to live victoriously and abundantly and yet you don't pray, then I don't believe you. Because prayer is how we live in the abundance of our